Well, good morning, Internet. Here we are again, another week. It's a Tuesday. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the program. My name is Jeff DeVerter. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist here at Rackspace Technology. And as you know, you've been hearing it for the past few weeks. It's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And so everything that we're doing is cybersecurity related. And holy cow, do we have a great episode for you guys today. Some amazing guests who are going to, I think, probably knock your socks off. So, hey, if you're here, go ahead and introduce yourself. Just comment down in the little link down below. It is the comment section on whatever platform you are using. So tell us who you are and where you are. All right, Brett is here. Brett, welcome to the program. Don't forget to tell us where you guys are. It's always fun to hear more about where in the world everyone is coming in from. Well, it is a rainy day here in San Antonio, Texas, and so as we come here now live, you'll remember that this program consists of a few different sections, and it starts with we'll get into how is the cloud making the news today, followed by a section on what have the cloud providers released, why does that matter to you, and then lastly we are in with our discussion with our guests, and I've got two of them here for you today. One of them is Merritt Baer. Now, Merritt is a principal in the AWS office of the CISO. Now, Merritt's history is it's pretty amazing, and she'll go through it a little bit. But if you look her up on LinkedIn, you'll see that she has a storied history of not only serving in some amazing organizations as adjunct professor in different areas, and even senior security counsel with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Not a trivial organization. So glad that we had her there. Now, also joining us today is a Racker, Gordan Milinkovic. Now, Gordan lives over in London, so this is truly a multinational program here today. He is a senior manager in cybersecurity, but really specifically what he's doing is enabling teams who are helping through what we call here at Rackspace elastic engineering to help continually modify and arm our customers to have the best from a security perspective. All right, Judy is here. Oh, Judy from San Antonio and Oklahoma City. Not sure how you work that out, Judy, but glad that you are here. We got Bill from San Antonio. A lot of San Antonians here today. Chris is here. Glad that you're here, Christopher. Well, as I mentioned, when we do this, we start with what's new in the cloud. So let's jump into that, and it starts with a really interesting article that I was reading earlier today, and that's the best security strategy is not something big and amazing. It's comprehensive asset management. It's still amazing. When you go through and you read these cybersecurity reports over and over, and I'm sure Merritt will have something to say about this when she jumps in here in a little bit, and that is how much of cybersecurity and how much companies can increase their defensive posture simply by what we'll call the blocking and tackling, those simple things that need to be done. And one of the simplest is just knowing what assets you've got. So this is an interesting article from over, I believe it was at eWeek where I found it. Daniel's going to post all of these in the chat or give you links to them at some point, but I encourage you to go check that out. Now, I also read an interesting article from Microsoft last week, and this article talked about and research that they did where cyber issues were coming from in the world. And according to their research, 58% of the nation state cyber attacks are coming out of Russia. Now, we're not necessarily saying this is the Russian government. We're not saying who these actually are. They're just giving us geographic attention as to where they're coming from. But we do know that the large nation states around the world, U.S. included, have pretty established cybersecurity plans and use it as a tool. But I'd encourage you to go read this research report. It's interesting to see where all of this is coming from in the world, and they've done some great research into that. All right, well, let's take us now into what's new in cloud releases. And we'll start, as always, with Amazon. Amazon Workplace Cost Optimizer 2.4 has been released. Now, 2.4 obviously meaning this is something that's gone through several revisions. And as you hear me talk about each week, these revisions and these from all the different service providers are really important because it's not just a stop, drop, and roll as far as cloud technology. It is a continually evolving set of tools. Even as new tools come along, they continue to be upgraded. And it's part of why we do this program, to help make sure that you understand what some of these updates are. So in this, a new feature is that you can delete unused workspaces, which would automatically, which will reduce cost for customers. Also, you can now deploy this into the government cloud, which is great. And customers can also provide a list of regions specifically to monitor their workspace loads. So that's kind of cool. Also coming from AWS is they have gone GA, general availability, with their VMware Cloud for AWS Outposts. And if you're not familiar already, AWS Outposts allow you to run native AWS in a location other than AWS. This is amazing when it comes to needing to be closer to a customer, having geographic requirements for your data where there might not be an AWS resource, or being able to just meet some compliance needs that you have, or you just like to hug your servers, but you want to run some AWS. So now you can run your VMware clouds natively in Outposts, which is fantastic. Now, new from or GA from Azure is Azure Translator now supports over 100 languages and dialects. Now, this just is incredible. This is one of their tools that you can connect your applications to, whether that's voice, whether that's text, string them all together to be able to now communicate in over 100 different languages and dialects. I can't even pronounce some of these. Georgian is one of them, Mongolian, a couple of different dialects out of Mongolia, which is interesting. So if you've got a global application with a global audience base, you can now do that in native tongues, or at least 100 different ones. Now, moving on, let's see, let's get this on the screen. There we go. We have preview, and this is dynamic concurrency for Azure Functions. Concurrency is pretty huge because it allows you to keep control over how your application is blooming under load, and also keep track of all the data. So now dynamic concurrency in Azure Functions is available, so you're able to adjust those concurrency settings based on a number of factors. Now, new over from Google is the Tau T2D VMs. Now, these are VMs that are Linux VMs that are specifically tuned for running cloud native type applications. So if you are running down that road in the Google world and want to be as cloud native as possible, then have they got a VM for you? Also, across 3 different database types, whether that's for Cloud SQL, for Microsoft SQL, as well as PostgreSQL, they now have conditional database access approval has gone GA. So if you are looking for support from your service provider or from Google to get in and look at your database specifically, which of course is going to potentially grant access to the data as well, you can do database access approval. You can grant and revoke that for specific times and specific people, which is great and should be there. Now, that kind of tidies up our section now on the news, and it's my pleasure now to be able to bring in our guests. In fact, we'll start with Merritt Baer. So let's go ahead and bring Merritt up onto the stage here, if you don't mind. And Merritt, welcome to Solve Live, your first time here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Now you're coming to us from Miami, so welcome from Miami. Now you've spent a little bit of time working in the cyber world. Just for a real quick kind of walkthrough and some of those highlights and things you've been up to.
Yeah, I've been a security person my whole career. So I've been in all 3 branches of government. As you mentioned, I've also done some teaching, and I think and write and speak and teach about sort of the future of the internet and how we're constructing the values we want to live by, and looking at that landscape level, whether I'm in U.S. government or here at AWS, where I'm really looking for the rising tide to lift all boats.
That's awesome. So when we were chatting a little bit before on how to create a strategy, and you had a really great quote that you I think have appropriated, but we'll credit you with it. But in countering the bad guys, and we'll just say that kind of blanketly, because there's whether it's a nation state or whether it's an individual, people are trying to do bad things with your applications. It's incredibly important to have that strategy, and I'll kind of let you kind of you walk it through much better than I do as far as having a
Yeah.
strategy or a hope or whatever.
No, so folks have different mentalities when it comes to thinking through how they want to characterize sort of the relationship in security between
Yeah.
you as kind of the defender and then the rest of folks out there. I don't actually worry too much about like any individual attacker. I think you build your house right, and then you don't worry about who's going to come in through the windows versus the doors. But I think that ultimately, it doesn't happen by accident. So I think the quote that you're referring to is actually one that I appropriated from Eric Brandwein, our distinguished engineer, who said, it's got to be someone's job. If it's not someone's job, then it's a hope, and hope is not a plan. And by that, we just mean that like you need to create those mechanisms. So good behaviors come from an accretion over time of sort of the ways that you implement the good desires that you have, but good intentions are not enough. And so turning them into mechanistic ways that you can ensure you replicate those good behaviors, kind of solve big problems by solving small problems. One example would be we don't close a trouble ticket until we've scripted remediation. So like
Mm.
build those, and then you literally have accreted these, security as code ways that you can remediate.
Yeah, and how about that article as well about how many times do you just have to encourage people to do the basic things? Have an asset list, understand what you have in production, make sure everything is patched. Get into an environment where you don't have to patch and let your service provider do that for you. How often is that part of the conversation?
Pretty much all the time. Yeah, we call it the eat your vegetables part of the conversation, right? Where it's like, look, so for example, ransomware is really high in the news right now. Well, all the
Yeah.
things you would do to defend yourself against ransomware, from having, a least privileged journey, from having awareness of your assets, like you mentioned, and the ability to not only have visibility, but to execute actions on them and to do kind of defense in depth, including identity and asset man, all these things. Like and patching, and well, all of these things are things that hopefully you would be doing anyway. And so a lot of this
Mm.
actually I think can be seen as just like that evolution of maturity. And as you mentioned, cloud is a huge help here, because whereas 10-20 years ago you had to worry about the rogue server under someone's desk, a lot of security issues tended to be manual. Now of course your visibility should be constructed in terms of like infrastructure as code. You can do ephemeral identities. You can
Right.
have no hard-coded credentials, but be using short-term ephemeral ones. So a lot of this is actually enabled by the tooling that you get. Not to mention, like you say, the best patching is the patching you don't have to do.
Right.
So allowing your cloud provider to take some of that, heavy burden off of you is one way to get your vegetables eaten in a less painful way.
Well, and as a lot of the folks who watch these programs somewhat regularly know that here in my personal life, I'm in the process of downsizing out of one house and moving to something smaller. And I'm reminded of an example I used to use a lot earlier, and that was all of the my history as an individual can be found in my garage, because that's where things go to just sort of not get looked at anymore in a lot of cases. And now I've got to go deal with all of that stuff. And I think a lot of people take that approach, or have taken in the past that approach to security. I've got an operating system that's a little bit old, but it's got an app we like, and I don't know what we're going to do with it, so we'll just let it sit over there because it's not bothering anyone. But we can't do that anymore. One, it creates exposure. But secondly, is security is less and less about a thing I have to do. God, have locks on my front door. And it's about a driver. It's a differentiator. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that's all changing.
Yeah, I think that's a good metaphor here, actually. So, one, I think that people underestimate the cost of staying in place, right? I think that they
Mhm.
are naturally risk averse if they're in the security industry. And they think a lot about the risks that they're walking into, but they're not thinking about the costs, literal and metaphorical, of just staying with what they have been doing, which I think is a kind of human
Yes.
fallacy that we tend to do. But to your second point, the reason that we had titled today's conversation "Security as a Business business driver is that when you and I were riffing, this is one of the things that I think is really core about that growing up from a technological standpoint, is that you don't silo your security team and tell them, come look at this stuff when we're done building it. Security has to be part of what you've woven into everything you do. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but I mean it literally. Like we are talking about your CI/CD pipeline having embedded security engineers and having review processes that are, for example, automated code scanning that you can go through and validate, that you come back to known good architectures or golden omnis, and that your security processes are reflective of the ways that you're actually building on your innovative side, and frankly, then become part of your value proposition to your customers. I think most customers these days actually are evaluating the security of what they're consuming as one of the main, product points of whatever industry you're in. And so for both the reason that you need to be able to scale and innovate and operate at an enterprise level, and the reason that security is one of the deliverables that folks are looking to, at this point, security must be a business driver. And I'm kind of sick of the security as a cost center trope. It is not. It is core to your business.
It is absolutely core to the business. Now, you guys over at AWS create some amazing tools. And I love the fact that security really is baked into everything that you do and influences stuff going forward, because it becomes these signal points also that you can then use to modify it and enhance over time.
Exactly.
And
sorry, just to point in. So, for example, one way that we get security to be a first-class citizen is by putting mechanisms in place. So, and by that, forced blameless escalations. Steve Schmidt, my boss, the CISO, reports directly to the CEO, and that's that's on purpose so that folks can never be outclassed by a security consideration. That security really needs to be treated in a way that is reflective of how you prioritize it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it takes me down a million different roads, but where I was sort of driving, because we've got another guest I want to make sure we get in here, and that is, how do we manage these things over time? Because while the automated aspects that happen inside of the tooling itself are a huge aspect of it, but as those evolve over time, as the threat landscape evolves over time, it does take eyes and ears and hands on keyboards to help ensure that custom applications continue to evolve as well. So let's bring Gordan into the program here. Now, Gordan is here with us here at Rackspace, and you help lead a group of individuals that part of a team we call Elastic Engineering. I'm going to define that really quick, and that ultimately is, it's a core group of people who are dedicated to individual customers who work the same burn down list, who are helping to evolve the infrastructure aspect of applications in their deployment out into cloud-based environments. And the thing that's so unique and different here, Gordan, and I'll let you live it, so I'll let you dig into it a little bit more, but is the fact that it's not a responsive service offering. It's an offering that is actually proactive and pushes our customers into areas to help make sure, in the context of security, that they're considering as much as possible on a day-to-day basis as the tools increase and as the threat changes. So Gordan, welcome. Gordan.
Hi guys, good afternoon. Hello from London. Indeed, Jeff, you kind of started, describing the Elastic Engineering we launched, at Rackspace back end of the last month, and the difference really I see in I think Merritt also mentioned how we ingrain ourselves in customers' DNA, which is, kind of turning it on its head, where, previously you'd kind of have security as an afterthought and, bring security people to vet, something that is being pushed out on the production line. This is actually taking it step, to the left, I would say, and, move us along, with the times. So we're involved from the, inception time. We're bringing the security aspect, to the production line, and before it gets too expensive to make changes, and ultimately, we can add value throughout the life cycle rather than, just to kind of be the people that pronounce occasionally the patient either wounded or dead, which isn't the place we want to be.
It's the fact that we are proactive in helping with that. And maybe Merritt, I'll go back to you for just a second. How many times do you get pulled into or get the email or the response saying, "Hey, we applied all the tools a year ago, and but yet we still had an issue"? How often do you find that companies aren't being as proactive with this level of tooling, with the security operations, that they really ought to be?
It is rarely a tooling issue.
Hmm.
Most of the conversations I have are around organizational change, even
Yeah.
though I am in a technical role. I think that's the really emblematic problem here. It isn't that the tooling doesn't exist, it's that they're not necessarily leveraging it, which is just a reflection of how they kind of aren't ready to for whatever reason. Folks don't have the right structure, they don't have the right support. As you've mentioned, they haven't kind of graduated to this model that moves beyond a perimeter. There's a lot of ways that I think the tooling itself is, increasingly helpful and allowing folks to get there, but you have to kind of, as Gordan says, or as lots of folks say, shift left. Like, you have to actually move your engineering teams into close conversation with your security objectives. And doing that doesn't happen by accident. You have to be really intentional about it. And you will change the way that your business considers things. And that will feel uncomfortable because change is not always comfortable. And so I think, it's sort of like time when I often will say, if you could have done this 6 or 9 or 12 months ago and now be reaping the rewards, like, wouldn't you be happy about that? And like, yes, that would have been so good of our, then do it now. Like, the second best time is today and the third best is tomorrow,
That's right. I always think does everything always go back to Homer Simpson? But the Homer Simpson, he's eating something horrible, and somebody says that's going to make you feel terrible, and he goes, "That's a problem for future Homer." But in this case, we're talking about how do you give yourself and your organization a gift in 6 months, in 6 weeks, even. Should you have started 6 months ago? Absolutely, you should have. If you haven't, but start the work today. And you're right; it is absolutely uncomfortable work because we're taking traditional organizational structures and shuffling them like you'd shuffle a deck of cards, because we've got to move out of this mode where it's, hey, when we're done, we give it to these guys to look at. And when they're done, we give it to the other folks to look at and let them, kind of deal with any problems that they find. And that's the whole reason. We're not here to pitch necessarily elastic engineering, but we're here to say this is the model where your support, quote unquote, support teams are embedded with your developers, who are hopefully embedded with the legal team and embedded with the security team and 5 other business groups inside of an organization. These are big changes. So Gordan, maybe back over to you, as you've helped Rackspace, deploy this out into some customers. Do you find that there's resistance initially from other groups to adopt some of the changes and such that you're bringing forward?
Yeah, sure. I think, depending on the maturity of the organization, culture is something that you can't really easily switch. You can buy tools, you can hire people, but culture is something that requires investment. And I think where you look at over the years working with a lot of organizations, it ends up being a question of whether the leadership buys into a change. The culture doesn't come from the ground. It's something that really needs to be instigated and believed by the board, and then it only will have a chance of succeeding. It's easy to kind of go for the shelf and buy the tools and hire even the best people, but ultimately it's everyone's input that's required to turn the ship. If it's gotten into shallow waters, maybe it's the time to turn the tide and turn it away from there. But overall, I think in our conversations earlier we touched on this. There isn't a silver bullet, and it really is comprehensive strategy that's required to be put together to tackle whatever the challenges and obstacles there may be in the way to maturing the cybersecurity and the information security in general posture. So that may be a long road for some. It may be a question of small tweaks for others. They may be already champions doing a lot of things well, but overall it is really about being honest with yourselves. Companies being switched on about what the gaps may be and going about resolving them in a prioritized manner.
Well, and our topic, our title for today is cybersecurity as a business driver. And let's put some teeth to that. To be able to sit in front of a customer of your company, whoever that might be, and to be able to give tangible examples of agility, of, hey, those ransomware attacks that happened, and name a few. By the way, they came through these types of holes and were caused because of these incidents. We remediated for that 6 months ago. To be able to have those proof points to then be able to put up on a marketing, in a marketing deck, on a slide, and be able to speak to that is transformational, because we do hear on a daily basis, an hourly basis in some cases, about these very high profile attacks, or these billions of usernames and passwords that have been leaked from company XYZ. And to be able to know that there is a remediation plan that probably even dealt with it ahead of time, that becomes pretty powerful stuff. Merritt, back to you for a second. As you go and represent AWS, I would like to think that this, you guys are absolutely a security-driven company. To be able to put up these types of proof points aids in the conversation of why AWS.
Yeah, so I spend about half my time trying to make our security even stronger, and about half of it talking to customers about how to improve their posture. And I think those are important because the empathy from working in a security shop gives me the credibility to talk to other folks about, like, we work on this too, and I think that part of this is just as we have said, the ability to create mechanisms that get yourself better over time and start somewhere. And you'll take advantage of tooling. So you'll have your protective guardrails, things you just don't allow to happen, your detective controls, which in the cloud are logging and monitoring. And then your remediative. So on AWS, this is Lambda functions and other things that allow you to get back to a known good state. And so those toolings, enable your shop to put in place those mechanisms. But ultimately, to Gordan's point, like, culture is what you repeatedly do. You can't just wake up one day and say, I want this culture. Like, you've got to live it, right? And so part of that is the challenge. Like, you can't become a world-class security shop without doing it. And I think that there's an element of getting comfortable with this new reality of how security will look. So a lot of times you may not even be using what you consider to be security tooling. Let's say you've cloned a database. Well, now that could be a canary, where you're looking at whether data has been augmented. And then you come back to a known good state. So things that are really being leveraged in a security function that don't have to be titled with security marketing, I think is where we're leading to as an industry here. And yes, to your point, no ransomware attack I've seen has been through a 0 day. It's stuff that we know we need to work on. And don't get me wrong, it's still hard work, but it's stuff that we know we can do. And so I also want folks to kind of feel empowered and like they do have the visibility and the tactile ability to implement changes and to grow better over time and to come back to known good states and just kind of embrace that cloud scale functionality.
Yeah, and we're back to where we started kind of earlier. If you're early in the journey, start with the blocking and tackling. Ensure that you've got backups. Ensure that you're patched. Ensure that you've got all those things taken care of, and then start to work on, or even in tandem, work on those organizational shifts, on the upgrades to your environment to be more modern. And even for those workloads, which you're going to sunset in a year or two, and you don't want to do lots of investment. Well, we'll be the first to tell you that there is modern infrastructure that can help protect your data as well. So, everyone, I want to thank you so much for watching here today. Merritt and Gordan, thank you for being here. Merritt, we'll start with you. How can people find you? We'd love for if there's any questions, people can reach out.
Yeah, please do. The easiest is on Twitter. I'm at Merritt Baer. We can put my correct spelling in the comments here to our two T's, but free to reach out. And I'm also happy to talk to folks about jobs at Amazon or in general. One of the big ways that I think we're going to see significant change in this industry is by having a diverse, healthy workforce. And I think as we move to more automation and more enablement, we're going to see security folks take all forms, and that's really exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then, Gordan, how can folks find you if they have any questions about security, of course, but anything about Elastic Engineering?
Sure. Yeah. Perhaps LinkedIn is a professional network of choice, and is probably the easiest by far for me to get hold of me and talk anything, security, Elastic Engineering, Rackspace, or anything else. I'd be happy to engage.
That's great. All right. Or over to rackspace.com/elastic-engineering. Well, everyone, we hope you have a great day. Hope this helps encourage you to go take those next steps, whatever they might be, to help secure your company and even your personal stuff, because that's as much at risk as well. So everyone, thanks so much and have a great day.
Thanks, guys.